All right, welcome everyone. So great to have you to our special webinar this evening called Fake Diseases. We are going to get into this topic really soon. I just want to start by once again warmly welcoming you and letting you know that this event is hosted by myself, Jill Hewlett, and my mother, Helen Hewlett, and sister, Angie Hewlett. And we make up what's called the Hewlett team. And we are on the Mission Nutrition because it has made such a huge positive impact on our lives over the past few decades. And so we can't help but want to share that information with others. So on that note, before I introduce our guest speaker for the evening, I just wanted to share quickly a little bit about our story and how we got into what we're doing right now. So my mother is now 79 years old. You wouldn't know it by looking at her or trying to keep up with her, but that is the age she is. She's like the Energizer Bunny. But in her mid to late 50s, her health was starting to decline. And she was concerned about the symptoms that she was experiencing. And so she went to the family doctor, the MD, and to tell him, like, this is happening and that's happening. And I'll give you examples of what she was experiencing because maybe you can relate as well. She was having weight gain, age spots on her skin appear, bruising that would take a long time to go away, varicose veins appearing, her gums were receding. So the dentist said she had to see a periodontist, more and more gray hair coming in, weight gain, low energy, and to top it off, she was actually getting pain in the middle of the night, waking up in discomfort and literal pain because of, what the doctor will tell you what was going on, but basically that was happening to her and she was having all these concerns. So she then went to the doctor to let him know these are a variety of the symptoms I'm experiencing and I'm very concerned about this happening at my age. He went on to say, Helen, this is just part of the aging process. Don't worry, this happens to everyone. It's kind of basically, in other words, he's saying it's downhill from here. You're over 50, you're getting closer to your 60s now, so you just got to accept that. But the reason why you're getting pain is because you have the early stages of rheumatoid arthritis. And basically, we can't do anything for that other than pain managed. So I'm going to give you a prescription you can fill for pain medication. And so that was basically the gist of it, right? And so my mom left and she was like, oh boy, there aren't many solutions here. My body's basically falling apart and there's nothing that can be done according to the message she was given from her MD. So the saying, when the teacher's ready, the student will appear. Or no, sorry, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Maybe it's both. I guess they have to line up together. But in any case, what happened was my mom was looking for options and she was ready for real solutions. And she turned on the TV and happened to be that on breakfast television was this amazing doctor who was a veterinarian, primary care physician, and naturopath. And what ended up happening was she listened to his message about chronic degeneration, and what was happening, according to like the examples he gave, was exactly what was occurring for her. She felt like a textbook case. She said, you know what, this guy's described me to a T. So she called me up, and as synchronicity would have it, she said she proceeded to tell me about this individual and was hoping I could help her get in touch with him. It just rang a bell. It sounded so familiar. Everything she was describing about this doctor and his message, it was like I already knew about it. Well, long story short, he was doing a media tour in the GTA, and he was going to be an upcoming guest on the wellness TV show that I was hosting and producing at the time. So I said, you know what? I can do better than just connect you with them. I can introduce you in person. Come to the station, come to the green room, and we'll say hi in person and you can talk to him directly about your health issues. So that happened. And that was the most pivotal turning point in my mom's health, because right away he understood what she was dealing with. And he said, you do not need to fulfill that prescription for pain medication. You can deal with this naturally. You can rebuild your system and you can make yourself healthy again. You just need to give it the right the right materials to work with. And so she, with the guidance of this doctor, Dr. Joel Wallach, many of you already know him, she basically changed her diet so that she was getting all the good foods. She took out the bad foods and she put in the 90 essential nutrients. And within days, she started to feel better. Within weeks, starting to see even more noticeable changes. And within months, not long, but within months, the symptoms started to reverse to the point that the age spots were reducing, like the bruising and the varicose veins were starting to diminish. Her graying hair wasn't coming in as strong. Her energy wasn't as low, so she started to not have to crave coffee as much to keep her going. And the dentist said, I don't know if you're just brushing your teeth a lot or flossing more, but you don't need to see the periodontist anymore. So all these amazing things, but to top it off, she stopped having the pain. So that is key, because anyone who's been in chronic pain knows that this is a big issue, and you'll do anything to get out of that discomfort. So that's there are other stories we could share, stories that success stories with my sister's health and my own. But that is kind of the heavy hitting story of what drew our whole family onto this path and this mission nutrition. And because of the work I do in the wellness field, it made a lot of sense to share with people the importance of giving the body what it needs to function properly, feed the cells what they need for their structure and function. And this has become an education path for me that does not get boring. I love hearing more and more about it. And I think you will this evening agree with that statement. And someone who is an avid learner and now becoming a well-known educator himself is our guest this evening, Ryan Aleckszander. And I get to say that he's also a friend and wellness colleague of ours, involved with the longevity team in Canada here. And he's working with people internationally, answering their health questions, getting them the resources they need. And he's really making a big difference. We're so excited for him and we're proud of him. And we're so thankful he's joined us this evening. Thank you, Ryan.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jill.
It's amazing. We can't wait to dive into your new book. But to start with, can you please share with the folks, your personal health story, because it's really significant and it will set the tone for why you're on the path that you're on.
Well, my health story, my result basically is kind of the best that you could hope for in this sort of business. I was in lifelong pain. I was born with my hips dislocated, so I was tangled up in a ball and basically was just in pain from there. I was really fragile. I could turn my neck too quickly. A muscle would bulge out. I'd be in a neck cast and have to go to school in the neck cast and that kind of stuff. So shaking, twitching, they could have called it Tourette's. My doctor wasn't really keen on giving me exact diagnoses. Maybe this is juvenile arthritis. I would even call it now, what I would call it was stiff man syndrome, because I've seen it before. I was really stiff all the time. Either I was in pain from a currently pulled muscle somewhere on my body, or fearful of pulling a muscle. So I would always just be naturally stiff in case I would move too quickly and pull something. Anyways, it was a nightmare. Stomach pain, headaches, acne. It's quite a long list of problems actually. But when I say I'm the best case scenario, and probably why I'm such a diehard advocate now, is because my result was in less than a week. In less than a week, I took the right products and all of my pain was gone. I didn't get to 100%. I was probably at 97% in less than a week. Could move my neck fully around, no problems, slept through the night. I had insomnia that whole 25 years as well. And it was like a light switch. It was like a whole new life. I was physically miserable the whole time until boom, I got the result with the right product. And that's not what everybody should expect, obviously, when we talk about this kind of stuff. But since I was such a dramatic result, that's really what led me to kind of drop everything else that I was doing in life or planning to do in life and say, what do I have to do to make a living from this, basically?
Oh, amazing. It was like the universe wanted you to see how powerful this is so that you could support others on their health journey. And I just think of our mutual friend, pharmacist Ben Fuchs, who says, the sicker you are, the faster you'll see results. So it was like your body was like a sponge to immediately, it needed and to absorb and put to use the right nutrients that you started giving it. And what did that look like? Like and how did you find out about this option? And then what did you start to do?
Well, I had been taking the tangy tangerine. It's not really a product placement kind of call, but most of us know about the tangy tangerine. Most people will be listening. So we were taking the tangy tangerine for like a year. My friends were addicted to it, but tangy tangerine doesn't have everything that we need. It doesn't have all the minerals that we need for the bones and the joints and the muscles. My problem was mostly a bone joint muscle problem. So that was the product that I was basically waiting on. And so what happened is people like you, Nelson, Judy, Nelson in particular, really kind of held my hand through this, kept giving me books, kept inviting me to events. You mentioned pharmacist Ben Fuchs. Well, it wasn't until Nelson brought me to go meet pharmacist Ben Fuchs and see him live for the first time that I really said, wow, this really makes sense. Maybe I should get on that second product that Nelson's been talking about all this time, right? But he actually grabbed me 6 sample packages at that event. I took them with me on my way. By the time they were done, all my pain was gone.
It's amazing. Well, we're talking about the menu of the cells. This isn't hocus pocus. This is research-based, and it's based on the research that Doc Wallach did on a multi-million-dollar grant decades ago through the government in the States, where he studied the diseases in animals and the chronic degeneration, and was a top pathologist on this research case, and then translated that into humans and the degeneration that's happening to people at younger and younger generations now, because the food that we're eating is not enough, and there's a lot of lack in our diets. So when you give the system what it needs, as you're a testimony to it, our body knows what to do with it. So let's segue into then your amazing book, Fake Diseases, here, everybody. And the link is in the chat box, how you can get a copy. You can see it's not a big read. It's a potent read. There's not extra, ruffles and frills in here. This is right to the point. Every, I feel, sentence, Ryan, has value, and you just cut to the chase and gave such important, useful information that I said to my mom, you've got to read this. So I got her a copy. And then we started, as we were chatting about it, we're like, let's have Ryan come in and talk himself as the author and really go through the book with us, starting with the name of the book, how you came up with that.
Well, I've been doing the social media thing for quite a while now, so I kind of think in captions, right? Titles, captions, same sort of thing. And even, I wanted it to be breezy. I wanted it to be to the point, and I think that's part of the training on social media. On Instagram, we've now answered almost 18,000 questions, and you only get 15 seconds per question, right? So you have to be rapid fire, and you have to really learn to get to the point. But also in dealing with people in real life, I've been doing this 6 years or something now, and we've heard this basic questions that come up, the basic misunderstandings, the meat of the point that people really want. So that's what it is in the book. I'm actually working on a bigger one to sort of expand on it, to be the opposite token. This is the light and breezy version, but I do want to do the full version.
Okay, so we'll look forward to that. But this is a good entry point for people, because you don't have to have a science background to understand what you're saying. It is very straightforward and user-friendly, and that's what we like. But the idea of fake diseases, are there really fake diseases out there? Are we buying into an idea that there's certain diseases that exist when they actually don't? Is that your point here?
Well, a big part of the book is that most of what we deal with out there are probably misnamed if we call them a disease. And if we think of them as a disease, we're not really helping ourselves. Like if we think we catch diabetes, for example, or cancer, or that it runs in families, so you caught diabetes from your family or from your genes somehow, this doesn't help you when this has a cause that is not addressed by a treatment. Basically, at the beginning of this whole thing, a disease is called a disease so that a licensed medical practitioner can treat it, right? This is the whole legal qualification of what constitutes a disease. So when we're talking about fake diseases, this is how we can have things like obesity or addiction being labeled as diseases. Why? Because now licensed practitioners are paid to treat those diseases. Basically, the physician's desk reference is a big book. It's a big list of all the diseases that can be treated by medication or radiation or this and that, all these treatment options that are available. They have to be a disease first to be able to be treated and for insurance to deal with that. So there's an ever expanding list, and a lot of these things overlap. So we're talking about fake diseases. Sometimes we're talking about motor disorders or neurodegenerative diseases. Well, it doesn't help the patient or the person, the human being, and it doesn't help us to talk about MS as a thing that you catch that you need to be treated to cure. We're not even allowed to use the words treat and cure, right? Even what we're doing here right now today, we're not legally treating or curing any symptom or disease. This information is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure, the spiel, right? So since we can't even legally do that, it definitely doesn't serve us to think about that. The problem here, and why I even wrote this and why I wrote it briskly and so that the average person can understand it, is that people come to us and say, can you help me treat my MS? Can you help me treat my diabetes, my IBS, my Crohn's, my whatever it is, right? And we're literally not allowed to talk like this, right? So it doesn't help them to think like this. It doesn't help them to talk like this. And we're not allowed to talk to you like we can't answer. We can't say, do this for your diabetes in order to expect this result. We can't, that's treating a problem. So when we reword this, what we actually do is we support a healthy body, right? How I got out of pain wasn't that I was cured of a disease that I caught from anywhere. My mom didn't have enough nutrients. I was born with birth defects. That was never rectified. When it was, the pain was gone. My bone and joint health was supported with the nutrition. I achieved health. A healthy person doesn't have a problem. A healthy person doesn't have a disease. See how complicated this is? This is just to speak legally about health problems, everyday health problems that everybody has. In order to legally speak about it, we have to actually reconfigure them and say, hold on, you have to rethink about this thing from the legally opposite angle. We're supporting your health. We're not treating a disease. And when you think about it, you don't want to support a disease anyways. We don't want to address a disease. What is diabetes? Right? Ben Fuchs will talk like this. What is diabetes? It's not a thing, right? It's a process. It's not a noun, it's a verb. So we need to reverse this process and get you closer to health rather than closer to illness. And rather than having thousands of names for problems, and each time there's a new variation of that problem, they add another German doctor name to the problem, rather than doing that, we can just say, okay, you have a nervous system problem. So we want to support your whole body and particularly support your nervous system. And there isn't that many categories of disease. It can be very simple. It's either in the bone and joint problem category, a blood sugar category. There could be catastrophic failures. I feel like I'm going ahead of myself right now. I feel like I want to give you a chance to jump in.
Oh, it's great, Ryan. I really enjoy listening to you. It makes such sense. And what the gist of what I'm going to get from this and summarize is that we've made health too complicated. And then by labeling things in a certain way, we're actually putting people and their health into a box. And we're kind of keeping them there rather than letting them unwind a process that has accumulated in their system for specific reasons that can be addressed. And people listening may think, oh, Jill and Ryan, they're oversimplifying this. Well, if you saw the number of people that we have, ourselves included, reverse and change and improve and reduce symptoms greatly and get on a new course of health, you would be realizing it's true. It's true. Our cells, we're composed of 50 to 100 trillion cells, and they've been on the planet for 3.5 billion years, and they know their stuff. Our cells, when we basically give them what they need, can do amazing, amazing things. And so what in today's lifestyle, combining the stress and the lack of nutrition, we're not setting ourselves up for success. It's amazing that we're even getting by, Ryan, as far as I'm concerned, by some of the lifestyle habits that folks are implementing and the lack of really nourishment that they're basically not getting. So how about we go into, I want to follow your lead in this, your book best, but are there some key high level points that you want to draw out or examples? And of course, before we go into the Q&A, it would be great to have some of your top recommendations when it comes to people improving their health, because I'm sure people on tonight everyone's dealing with their own health issue, but there's universal things we can all do. And maybe they've got friends and family who are wanting to improve their health. And, there's some kind of universal starting points that we can all embrace.
Okay. Well, we have to realize that the whole allopathic, which is mainstream medicine, basically any hospital, any radiologist, you go and see a urologist or OBGYN, this is all allopathic medicine. Most of what this profession treats is not what it is best in, right? It's best in trauma care and a handful of infectious diseases is what medical doctors really thrive and really shine in. If you get hit by a car or you get shot by a bullet, you want to go see a medical doctor, you want to go get to a hospital, you want to take the sedative and all that stuff that they give you to keep you alive and whatever, post-surgery, even whatever, take the blood thinners that could save your life, all this kind of stuff. So emergency medicine is what they're given a lot of credit for, and this is what holds them on their podium. But when we go and see them with a blood sugar problem, or we're hoping to get their help in avoiding a birth defect, or we have a bone and joint problem, we have arthritis, or we have something more serious, like a bigger failure, cancer, what they might call an autoimmune disease. I would separate out these things, but they're the same basic category of degenerative diseases. Basically, a doctor can save your life if you get hit by a car. They can save your life if you need an antibiotic to save your life from a viral infection or bacterial infection or something like that. Obviously, if you have another infection, they can cut off your leg and save your life, that type of thing. But when it comes to any degenerative disease, they're terrible. They're terrible at it. They have terrible success rates in helping people get out of pain. Cancer treatments, obviously, they're just not good. This is why most people come to us in the first place. This is why we have any sort of a business. You mentioned at the beginning, Helen was looking for answers. I wasn't looking for answers as much as I could have been. Truthfully, I'd already given up. But most people come to us because they are looking for those answers. They know they haven't gotten them from the allopathic world. So what should you do? I mean, our message is actually extremely simple. It's ridiculously simple. If we didn't do Q&As and handle different questions, we would just be saying the same thing all the time. Avoid the bad foods, take the 90 essential nutrients. It sounds way too simple, but it is, and it's extremely effective for most people. When we say most, that means stay in touch, and maybe you're one of the people that might need to tweak it a little bit in order to get your results. But even if you listen to Dr. Wallach, it can sound kind of complicated. You might say you need 2 brain and heart packs per month and make sure to add this product and this product, and for this month it's not that complicated. For the majority of people, we get messages every day, people who say, for the first time they've messaged us, they've never talked to us before, and they say, hey, we've been following you for a while. I stopped eating gluten 3, 5, 6 months ago or whatever. My life's different. I heard you talk about salt, started using salt. My life's different. So we're not even talking about buying products. Basically, you can pick any part of the message and do it. At the very first, the very beginning of Dr. Wallach's very first recording, Dead Doctors Don't Lie, it says, if you only take 10% of this information away, you can improve your life greatly. You might add years to your life. It's still true. Our message hasn't changed. That fact hasn't changed. And our list of foods to avoid is pretty short. There's 12 bad foods, as Dr. Gluten says it. Dr. Wallach doesn't quite put it that way. But it's a pretty simple list, truthfully, especially gluten being the highest one on that list.
Yeah. And let's talk about that, Ryan. Let's go into that for a second. Let's break those down. You said gluten, salt, and what about butter? Why don't we choose those 3, just because they're not things that our mainstream medical practitioners are telling us to do, and yet when people do them, they get substantial results. In fact, though, we're even told don't salt our food, don't use butter, and doesn't tend to be talk around cutting back on your grains or going gluten-free. So could you just spend a little bit of time on those for us?
Well, let me wrap this back into fake diseases here for a minute, because this is,
okay.
Especially when it comes to salt, this is part of why I have such a problem with how we define these things, is because we've eliminated most of these problems, or all of these problems, in animals. Every human disease has an animal correlate, and we've eliminated it in the animal industries. In the animal industry, if you don't give your cow or goat or whatever, chickens, if you don't give them access to as much salt as they need, as much salt as they want, they'll die. They'll develop a disease and they'll die. Or they'll have a health problem, they might get mastitis, they might get whatever. They're not going to be fully productive. They need to give them full access to salt. And the human beings come to us, they really only have 2 categories of problem. And they can have both categories, but they only have 2 categories. I simplified it in the book. I'll simplify it even more now. Only 2 categories: digestion and deficiency. All right, so the deficiency, the whole chemical recipe starts in the stomach. And the stomach is acidified with salt. Your body uses salt to make strong stomach acid. Doctors who say that they're against salt, I mean, there really never was enough evidence to fully justify it, and they've just been running with this ball. People get phenomenal benefits just by doing salt alone. We don't need to see people. People listening might not know. We do most of this online. We don't see these people. We don't talk to them in real life. This is by messages, basically. So We don't need any fancy tests or anything in order to improve someone's life. And some of it is just giving them basic information that a farmer would have for their cows. Treat you the exact same. You have full access to salt. You have as much as you want. If you have too much, it'll taste too salty. You won't be able to have any more. That's it. It really is that simple. The body is smarter than you are. The body's smarter than your doctor is. And your body will tell you exactly when it's had enough salt. The other one you said there was gluten. Gluten's, I wish we didn't ever had to talk about this either, by the way. And it would be a lot easier if it was just take the 90 essential nutrients. We're not selling food, so it's kind of annoying, but it's imperative. It's imperative because if we don't avoid these bad foods, the foods will kill us. You can't out supplement a bad diet, especially not the types of stuff that we have available today, particularly with gluten, right? People say, why is gluten a problem? Jesus was eating wheat. My grandparents ate wheat and they lived to 110 and whatever. It's true that wheat in the past was not the same as wheat is today. The whole germ is much bigger. The whole thing is much bigger. The stalk itself is much smaller. The plant itself is physically altered. So there is more of this gluten now. Our recipes for breads have changed. Particularly, we don't add bone meal and wood ash anymore. Those are two major mineral sources that humans had access to forever. All the way out the blue zones, they still have them. They're still using bones and wood ash. And they'll be using this in soups and stews and puddings and meatloaf and all kinds of things, but also in things like breads and patties and whatever they're making with flours. They wouldn't always be rising
Ryan,
flour.
oh, by the way, just throwing in so people understand what blue zones are. In the blue zones, these are where the longest lived cultures are, right? The cultures that have the most centenarians, right? People who live to be over 100. And these people are following these simple practices. Just wanted to interject that point so people understand that this is about healthy longevity and there's people out there doing it.
Well, in the blue zones, they can eat a little bit of gluten because they're still eating the ancient grains. They're still using bone meal. They're still using wood ash. They don't eat a lot of food overall. They have a very high mineral diet overall. They have all the other things checked off the lifestyle list, living in close units, living in a place that has not a lot of stress, working hard every day, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of mental components to it as well. Sure. But they still eat gluten is the point, right? And this is something that comes up. People say, well, they eat gluten and what National Geographic says is the longest lived place in the world. But again, they don't eat very much. They eat a different product. The recipe is different. It's not modern processed sugar. It's not modern processed flour. I said sugar there because you don't get gluten these days without sugar. You don't eat gluten without sugar. If you had sugar-free cookies, they're gross. They're not worth your time. So anytime you encounter gluten now in this environment, it's a different product, different recipe. It's got sugar in it as well. It's going to mess up your guts is the real point of it. And that if you wanted to just take products and hope that, your body's going to absorb it all, we're telling you that's not the case. If you quit gluten, your life will improve very likely on its own, which is a great piece of free information, that anybody can take to improve their whole family just by making them gluten-free. Just like that, problems start to disappear. People start to say, I don't even get sick anymore. Obviously, rosacea can clear up all this type of stuff. And this is go back to fake diseases. A lot of the problems that are actually called diseases, think of eczema and psoriasis, and we're even going to call asthma a symptom of a digestion problem. These things are called diseases. But if you can fix your diet, you can take out the offending food and your symptoms go away. How is that a disease? It's really not. It's not helpful for you to think of it as a disease. It's not helpful for you to go and see a licensed medical practitioner and get, any sort of a pharmaceutical solution to something that was caused by eating the wrong foods. And this is a huge list of problems. It's a huge category of disease. And anybody who has a blood sugar problem, they probably also have a digestion problem as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this is really about shifting our perspective and our mindset around health. And we people have not been educated. We don't learn this in school. We're not learning it from our parents when we're young. Society is not promoting this message. We're not seeing it on mainstream media. Our health has become politicized, commercialized, and it's limiting our innate wisdom, our own intuition, and also just the common sense practices that you mentioned that people are living in these blue zones that are giving them a health advantage. So I'm really enjoying hearing about the gluten, how the media see if you can, take gluten out of your diet, you will automatically see changes. personally, I will say I lost weight right away taking gluten out, and I felt less inflamed. The inflammation went down. And now that I don't have it, when I do have it, if I have a tiny bit, I'm fine. But if I have any more than that, my body will tell me. And I think that's something that I had become desensitized to listening to until I actually saw the contrast of not having it for a period of time. And now, sticking with that, basically gluten-free diet. So there's that. And salt, I have to say, I love salting my food. And you are right. Once a person has reached their quota of salt, where they've just had enough, you start putting extra on. It doesn't taste good. No one is going to over salt their food, because it does. We all know it doesn't taste good. But my digestion is so much better when I salt my food, and I can tell when I don't do it. So I'm really, thankfully, through this process, really listening to my body. So you might want to comment on those things, but also let's go into the butter issue, because we've been led to believe that in many cases, margarine is better than butter. And you see the Heart and Stroke Foundation, when they're out there doing their runs or bike-a-thons or walk-a-thons, who's sponsoring it? They sell. And so I'm just curious, these companies are promoting something other than butter, when, I think of my grandparents who lived well into their 90s, and regular butter was a staple in their household, so you'd like to comment on that.
Well, margarine has never been a better choice. Margarine is an industrial product, and household consumers were never interested in purchasing it until a marketing campaign called the Mediterranean diet came out, which was endorsed by the American Heart Association in association with Procter and Gamble. This is a legitimate conspiracy. Sometimes I might get caught in talking about conspiracy theories, but this isn't a conspiracy. This is a totally documented phenomenon. Don't remember the year, early 1900s. Ansel Keys on the board of Procter and Gamble, basically they'd secured the patents for Crisco, and they wanted to market it to a world that used butter and lard, and they made their own soap and all this stuff. So then they didn't need Crisco. No one needed vegetable oil for cooking, or hydrogenated oils, or any of that kind of stuff for cooking, because for all of mankind's history, we've been using fats for cooking, natural fats, butters, lards, ghee, duck fat, anything like that. So we didn't need it. We didn't know we needed it until they created the Mediterranean diet. So again, it's a legitimate, it's a marketing campaign. People think it's an actual diet, that people in the Mediterranean eat that way. It's not true. And it was very selective, and it was corrupt from the whole way through. And it was a marketing campaign. So margarine's never been good for us. There's never been evidence that margarine's been good for us. It's nonsense. And in fact, we would say it's one of the worst foods. Oils is on our list. We do have a short list of bad foods. Oils is on the list. You don't want to cook with oil. If you flip over a packaged product and it has oil in it, shouldn't probably be eating processed foods anyways, but if it has oil in it, definitely don't eat it. Don't deep fry. Deep fry and oil is on the list for the exact same reason. It's oil, right? So
yeah, very good point. Yeah, and Doc Walt's big on that. No oil, zero. Get them out. So there's these bad foods, and I know my sister put in the chat box there that we have Dr. Glidden's video on our website to go through that more thoroughly for people who want to understand what these 12 bad foods are, and really take them out, because there's other examples of things you should take out, like carbonation, and anyway, the list goes on. Sugar, of course, refined sugars, and much of this is common sense, folks, but you can get so much health benefit just by listening to doing these things. Never mind then, purchasing supplements to then fuel yourself properly as well. So just taking out the bad stuff will be a great gift to your cells, so they can function better. And then your next step would be to fuel them properly. So when it comes to fueling our system, I feel like in your book, you really raved about calcium. Do you want to speak about calcium for a bit there, Ryan?
Well, I have a particular affinity to calcium, because it was that group, that family of minerals that got me out of pain so quickly. So I know how dramatic it can be. And there's at least 200 specific diseases directly related to the calcium deficiency in the physician's desk reference. So it's a huge category of things that people are out there dealing with. But I wanted to pick up on something. You're talking about common sense. A lot of these longest lived people, when they're interviewed, they don't really know why they're the longest. Some of them literally say it's because I take naps every day, and out there in the blue zones, they don't know why or how they get their minerals. They don't know that there is 90 essential nutrients. They don't know there's 60 essential minerals. They do irrigate their fields with mineral rich water. I'm sure they've connected this, but they don't know the full extent of all these things that they do to provide them with a greatly fortified diet. And most of it just has to do with poverty. These are mostly peasant populations, so they're just making use of everything they have. They've been using their wood ashes because their great grandma used their wood ash and her great grandma used the wood ash. It fortified the food, it thickened it, it made it taste better. It was a spice as well as basically a flour itself. This is a major ingredient. We talk about ash, wood ash. It's something we just don't do anymore. It's a major factor here, especially if you live in a place that has all the minerals in the soil. So you mentioned common sense, and I'm bringing this up too, because how are we supposed to get all these minerals? That's why I wanted to write the other book for this. Fake Diseases is all about diseases and why we shouldn't think of them this way. But the real answer is real nutrition. How do we actually get this stuff? Calcium is one of the things that we got a lot more of out there in the natural lifestyle. Not only by, number one, irrigating our fields with some source of mineral rich water, especially mountainous water, or any water that's running down a long river is picking up a lot of different minerals as it's going in. It's mineral rich water. When you put that on the fields, the plants suck that up. They turn that into plant derived minerals. It's mineral rich plants. Then they burn those. They burn a lot of plants and wood material for their cooking and heating all day, every day. So you're getting an average something like 5 pounds of wood ashes per person, per stove per day, not per person. They throw those wood ashes, the dark ashes, out into the garden, out into the first rows of the fields or whatever. They take the fine white ash and they keep that as a condiment that they add into pretty much everything all the time, all of their food all the time. The next thing is bones, right? This is, again, just another example of why populations eat like this. It's not because of a spiritual belief. It's not because of they don't have a theory about why they do most of the things that they do, but they eat the whole animal because they make use of everything they got. And it just so happens that the mineral balance is perfect when you eat the whole animal. But as soon as you're only eating muscle, or you're only eating organs, or you're only eating muscle and organs, you've now created massive deficiencies because you're supposed to eat the whole animal. And a large part of that animal is the bone system, skeleton. So the primitive people, they would both grind up bones. They put them into breads, they put them into soups, they'd put them into stews, they put them into puddings, they put them into everything, bone meal. And they'd also leach the bones. They'd make them into soups, they grind them up afterwards. If there's anything left, they'd throw them out to the animals out there, to throw them out to the pigs or the dogs, or throw them in the compost heap. So I'm saying that literally everything is making its way back into their food system. They're eating the whole animal. They're not only eating the plants, but they're burning what's left. So say they're growing corn, they eat the corn, they burn what's left of the plants. They take those ashes, they eat those ashes, they put those ashes back out in the field. The next crop sucks that up. So this is, none of this we do. We don't do any of this. This is why we need to supplement. By the way, this is the answer of why we need to supplement. This is the answer of why, especially why calcium is so important, because we don't do any of that. There is no way for you to get enough calcium. You couldn't eat that much cheese. You'd be too constipated. It'd give you a disease, basically. Give you a health problem big enough to be called a disease. It'd still be a fake disease, but it would qualify as a disease nonetheless. Anyways, you can't eat it. It's not possible. It's the first thing that comes up. Milk, cheese, you can't eat it. You can't take over-the-counter supplements from a pharmacy and add it up that way. You have to take the whole bottle every day, and it won't do the job. In fact, there's a product that's very similar to Dr. Wallach's. OsteoFX is the product that got me out of pain. There's one in Costco here in Canada that's basically the same product on the label. You read the label, it's basically the same label, and it's like a third of the price. So you're like, whoa, right? Problem is, the Costco one doesn't work because there's more to the recipe than that's in the bottle. Point being here, the correct dose of this group of minerals is absolutely life-changing. A lot of the ones that we talk about, people talk about tangy tangerine and stuff. A lot of the vitamins and all this, you can get the vitamins in food, you can get amino acids in food. That's might not be the missing piece. Out there, Jill, in the real world, we're used to dealing with sick people. But online, actually, we deal with quite a lot of healthy people, a lot of very, very health conscious people, both young and older. So they're already eating quite well. So I'm actually pretty confident that they're already getting a lot of fruits and a lot of vitamins. Basically, they're eating lots of fruits and vegetables. Not that worried about that, but I know it's physically impossible for them to get that other category, that calcium category. This is calcium, magnesium, boron, strontium, a huge list here, copper and selenium. These are all a big major group of minerals that we need, and we're highly, highly deficient in. Now, let me go one step further here, because I started this off with livestock too. This is how we stop bone and joint problems in livestock, basically. And if this can be quite serious in livestock too, right? Talking about calcium deficiency here. Well, one of the symptoms of calcium deficiency is kidney stone formation. And if a cow gets this, they get water belly and they die. So you don't want your prize winning bull, to get water belly and die. It's a complete waste of money and time. So the farmers have learned to feed their animals enough of this stuff so they don't get these types of problems. And it was said that we've solved this over 1,000 years ago, by the way. Right? This is why it ends up being top of the list in fake diseases, because illiterate farmers in China apparently figured this out 1,000 years ago. And then they figured it out again in medieval Europe. Again, illiterate farmers figured it out again separately. And then we've spent billions of dollars in the 20th century mapping this out for animal feeds in the modern industry. And that's it. And we haven't applied that to humans except for Dr. Wallach. It's crazy. Literally, there is no other leader out there of a camp, because there's lots of people who know about this now, but they're all being led under Dr. Wallach because no one else knew about this. And let me just give you a chance too, but I'm going even deeper. Talking about common sense. People are like, well, how could nobody know this, right? You mentioned doctors aren't taught this. Doctors aren't taught nutrition. It can be even worse than that, since we deal with farmers who prevent diseases and reverse diseases in their animals. Right? We run into farmers all the time. They know about selenium. They give their goats selenium to prevent birth defects in the baby goats. They never thought to do it for themselves. And I was in the pet business too, and I knew this. If you don't give your snakes that powder, that they will be born with crooked spines, basically, or they won't make it out of their egg. If you don't give the rabbits their rabbit food, if you think you can just feed them lettuce, salads made by you with love, they'll die, or they'll eat their babies. They'll have miscarriages. These are serious, right? And this is what happens in humans too, except it happens faster in animals. You can see it faster. But my point is here, I didn't apply this to myself either. So we can see how doctors never learned this at all. And then the whole animal industry hasn't applied this to humans either. They never went home and thought, I should eat dog food. Those dogs never get kidney problems. Why don't I? Anyways, last point on calcium here. You hear a lot about alkalinity. It's a word that I try to avoid. It's because it's a bit controversial, but it's said that cancer cannot survive in an alkaline environment. It says that cancer thrives in an alkaline environment. There's also a lot of practitioners out there who claim that all serious diseases are going to be linked to something like candida or fungus. And it's also said that candida and fungus and worms and yeast, bad bacteria, all this stuff can only exist in an acid environment. Now, if the body goes up or down in pH too much, you'll die. There's a very, very slight tolerance here. So when we're talking about being acid or being alkaline, there's a very small difference. But in diseases terms, it's a huge difference. So I believe this. We don't have concrete proof basically that's, being alkaline will reverse cancer. But when you are alkaline, and you can measure this with copper, by the way, you can put copper on your skin. If your skin turns green or blue or black, it means you're slightly acidic. If it doesn't, it means you're all good. For most people, their skin will continue to be green or blue or black until they lose all of their extra weight, all of it. So if they're 40 extra pounds, it won't be until they lose all of that extra weight that they're not showing green anymore. So this means that if we're overweight at all, basically, we're very likely to be slightly acidic. It means we're very likely to be promoting the type of environment that allows candida or yeast or worms or mold or whatever to grow inside of us. And this is the exact same type of environment that makes it more likely for us to have cancer formally, or an autoimmune disease, or a lot of so-called viral infections. And I say so-called, I hope you didn't want to jump in here, Jill, because I went long.
Okay. You're doing great. You're going to keep going.
I say so-called because there's a lot of viral infections that are not directly correlated to a set of symptoms. And I'm going to say particularly here in the H viruses. This is going to be HIV, HSV, HPV, and even the hepatitises, although I didn't call out the hepatitises in the book. I mean the hepatitises as well. These diseases don't have direct symptoms associated with them. HSV, HPV, huge proportions of the population in the Western world has these antibodies or some markers that we have this virus infection at some point or even currently. But it's something like 2% of people have symptoms. So even the mainstream world themselves say that you have to have a weakened immune state in order to show symptoms of any of these so-called viral problems. And I said all this with the tail end of the calcium thing, because I did the same thing in the book too, right? You build up to lead up what we actually need, digestion problems and foods that can get in the way, and then what this means in a more catastrophic failure scenario. So there's a lot of people out there who've been eating the wrong foods chronically, so their system's all messed up and they got chronic deficiencies. Now they have a problem fully developed, and it might be in one of these serious categories like cancer or autoimmune disease or the H viruses, that kind of thing, right? To me, this means you have to have multiple failures. Some things have a very direct, like you don't have enough calcium, you get osteoporosis. It's a very direct, it's very mechanical. But then when you're talking about cancer, autoimmune, you have to have something going wrong in each category. I hope that's not too complicated, but that's one of the more key points here in this. When you said at the beginning, and Ben says it, and I love when he says that too, the sicker you are, the faster you can heal. This is my explanation for it, is because if you do have a catastrophic body failure, and by the way, I basically think the main difference between cancer and autoimmune is that cancer happens in one specific system in the body, one specific place, one specific tumor, or it's just in the blood or whatever, just in the kidneys, just in the prostate. And then autoimmune is just more general. The body's got general inflammation, general symptoms, and they can't figure out what's going on. So they call it an autoimmune disease. By the way, if you didn't know, there's no autoimmune disease that is directly correlated also with antibodies. So you might as well call them so-called diseases as well, because there's only a certain percentage of rheumatoid patients that are called rheumatoid that have the antibodies for rheumatoid. So there's no disease with 100% correlation. So that's a wonky situation as well. Mm-hmm. Anyways, point being, when you do all this stuff, when you listen to something like this and you have a serious problem, the sicker you are, the faster you can heal. If you do one thing in each category, your health will probably start to improve immediately. This is why it happens so quick. Because if you're failing in 4 categories and you do something about 2 or 3 of them, you probably improve quite quickly.
Ryan, wow, like that is a great summary. You have really given us the a high level summary of your book. People can certainly purchase it to go into more details and really understand, break down everything you've said. But I think what you really do is you make these health messages, this health education accessible. And you know, it's so enjoyable to listen to you. I could listen to you for hours. I mean, people will have to put your social media links as well in the chat so they can follow you there, because you're often leading live Q&As on Instagram, especially. That's your main platform. You've got a big following, and it's constantly growing because you're giving such useful information and examples. And you're under the leadership, the mentorship of directly with Doc Wallach, Ben Fuchs, Dr. Peter Gluten. These are top level doctors, pharmacists, people experts in their field, and you are quickly following in their footsteps. Of course, what got you on this path is your own incredible transformation, health transformation, and then your passion for this material. And I don't know how you retain it all, but you are really able to spew off this information like off the cuff. And I really I appreciate that, because it's the information that we're passionate about too, and we want to get this to people. We really, really do. And when you're talking about how the deficiencies, and primarily deficiencies in the soil, and these blue zones, these countries or areas, rather, populations that live have healthy longevity because of various lifestyle factors, in particular that they are eating from a mineral rich soil, I just had to smile, because you're right. Like, we stopped doing that with the invention of the oven, right? The electrical oven, and people stopped putting these ashes back in their soil because they didn't have the wood burning stove to take those ashes and put them back in their soil. But there are people like my grandmother, who, when she moved to Toronto from the farmhouse that she lived up in Bracebridge, Ontario, when she moved to Toronto, back in the day when horse and carriage would come along with the delivering ice blocks to the houses for their freezers, my grandmother would literally go out to the street and scoop up the manure of the horses and take it to their garden so that she could refertilize the soil there. And so, you know, I look at that and I think, you know, she not everyone was doing that, but she understood the importance. She grew up in, you know, Bracebridge. It's a real mineral rich area. And she just has fond memories of childhood of going into that root cellar and literally wanting to lick up and eat the soil because it was so delicious, right? And it's probably because it was that nutrient dense and her body knew how good it was for her. So there's that. And so then, you fast forward into my childhood, from that was my mom's upbringing, where my parents really did their best to, eat healthy. And my mom bought us multivitamins. And I remember taking bee pollen as a kid and just different like supplements here and there, but we didn't realize at the time though, Ryan, with the best of intentions, we were fractionating our nutrition. We were getting a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And this company was making this product and there's a sale on that. So we'll try that. And with your example of the Costco version of the calcium versus the longevity version, it really is about supplementing properly and with the best quality nutrients that your body will recognize, your cells will absorb, and they will put it to use. Otherwise, people are literally wasting their money. And then supplementing gets this bad rap because people say, well, it didn't do anything for me. Whereas you're giving a testimony to in a week's time, you saw like a 180-degree change. And my mom, very similar story in how quickly she saw her results. So I think results are really about, when it comes down to being dedicated to the path, taking out the bad foods so your system can absorb the nutrition properly, and then putting in the right fuel. And that is something that people can talk to us further about. We'd be happy to answer questions about that. I think now, if you're okay with it, Ryan, I hope I summarized that and reflected back in a good way. I'd like to open the floor to a bit of a Q&A. Do you have about 15 minutes for that?
I do. Let me say something very, very quickly here too. You kind of mentioned like, how do you retain all this? Well, when we first started this, I didn't have a full other kind of career. I had other plans and whatever, but I just put the brakes on everything and said, we're going to try and make a living from this. It was a huge statement. It's not an easy business to make a living from, especially not at the start. It's usually pitched as a side thing, right? You get a few customers, you build it up a little bit, and over years, you build an income. You don't just do it right away. So we're trying to do this right away. We're over our head, basically. I didn't go to university, all this kind of stuff. So I like reading books, but I'm not an expert by any means. I read Dr. Wallach's book. It doesn't make you an expert. We used to meet with people and then we'd go home and we'd watch the Dr. Wallach or the Dr. Gluten webinar on that thing, right? So if we met somebody, even maybe before we met them, we learned that someone said, hey, could you come talk to me? My aunt or my mom has diabetes. We'd watch the diabetes webinar right there. We'd pull out Let's Play Doctor and we'd look it up, not to memorize it word for word, but just to familiarize ourselves with it. So over hundreds of people, you just kind of know this now. But I'm saying this because it shouldn't be like you need to be an expert to do this. I look stuff up all the time. People come and they say, I'm on 12 drugs. I don't bother even attempting to remember all these drugs. I look them up each time. Which category is it in? Is this going to be a big problem? New diseases all the time. I don't think anybody has memorized all the diseases in the physician's desk reference. It's got to be impossible. All the time we're hit with things I've never heard of. Just look it up. And once you know that it's only going to be digestion or deficiency or both, all you're doing is trying to give the person a bit of information to put the pieces together and encourage them to actually do it. Like you said, part of this whole thing, if anybody who's listening who doesn't know this, part of this is the consistency, because you're not probably going to get a miracle like I did. And mine wasn't even a miracle. I make it sound like a miracle. I was on the tangy tangerine for a year first. I was gluten-free already, right? I already ate minimal calories by accident. I was also in a very good environment for healing when that happened. I was in a good place with good food. All this stuff added up for my miracle cure. You can only say it's cure when it's yourself. But everybody else should be prepared basically to be doing lifestyle changes and to be seeing gradual improvements. And that's the very basic message. And we can open it up to Q&As. I love doing Q&As. We usually focus on them on Instagram because it's just the meat of it. You just jump right into it.
Amazing, amazing. Well said. We really inspired people here that they don't have to be an expert, like you said, to learn this material. And with enough repetition, your brain starts to retain the information, and then you build on what you know, and you build on what you know, and it gets exciting because everything starts to make sense and become more familiar. And then our health doesn't become daunting, because understanding one's health, to me, and understanding these biophysiological processes, the biochemical processes is fascinating, and probably the most important education we can engage in, because it really is life or death. So I think it's absolutely key. And if not that, it affects our quality of life, right? I mean, people are just getting by, but just getting by when your body's falling apart and you're in pain is not the answer, really, when there's so much more possible, and literally a few changes can make a huge difference. So I think how we can handle the Q&A, if people can put questions in the chat box, I will go to one above here where Tom actually asked, is all salt the same? Or, is there a problem with white table salt? Or is there a better type of salt to have? If you'd like to start with that question, that will give a chance for people to put other questions in the chat box as well.
Yeah, that one, we actually get that one all the time. There's a lot of meme style information out there. What I mean is short pieces of information that are floating out there about health. And it's part of what makes this whole thing seem a lot more complicated than it is. When you see it in slide format, don't consume table salt. Did you know that it's got poisons in it? It scares you away from it. Chemically, sodium chloride, we require both of those. Those are both essential nutrients. The chloride is usually what we're talking about when we're talking about stomach acid. You use the chloride to make hydrochloric acid in the stomach. If I'm out and eating, I carry a salt shaker with me at all times, basically. But if for some reason I don't have my salt shaker with me, and I'm probably going to be ordering a steak at a restaurant because there's very little else that you can order without gluten and oil being in it reliably, I have to use the table salt if I forgot mine. Have to, because you need the salt to digest the food. You need the salt to make the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. You must have that or you will have indigestion, period. So you should be using the natural salt, but you shouldn't be scared of table salt to the point where you'll miss it or you'll eat a meal without it. I would skip the meal before skipping the salt. So
that's well said. That says a lot. You skip the meal before mixing the salt. Yeah, because when you put food in that you're not digesting, or it's taking a toll on your microbiome or your digestive process, it can do more harm than good, is basically what you're saying. Yep. So well said. So another question here is, what is the best thing to help with digestion, and heartburn?
Right, so it's the same question basically. And Angie just asked what type of salt. To me, it's any natural salt is great. We're all here in Canada. I think the best deal in Canada is Dollarama, Himalayan salt. Okay. Dollarama, somehow they sell it cheaper than everyone else. So Dollarama Himalayan salt, we have stacks of it here in this house. But it doesn't matter. You can have any natural salt. I wouldn't have table salt in the house, but yeah, my whole point was that if you are eating and you only have table salt, use the table salt. You need it. Heartburn was your question, right? Heartburn.
Well, Mary was asking about digestion and heartburn. So the salt will help with the digestion. Also, going gluten-free will help with the digestion. Do you have any? And then I think these two questions, though, she's asking like them together.
Yeah, and yes, both of those things would help for digestion. They're two different stages, right? They're two different problems. The gluten protein is very difficult to digest. So no matter what your stomach acid is, the gluten is going to cause a problem when it gets to the next stage, when it gets to the intestines. You want to be avoiding gluten because of the intestines, not because of the stomach. You want to use enough salts so that you have strong enough stomach acid. Heartburn, and we're not treating heartburn or acid reflux with salt because it's not caused by a virus or anything, basically, right? It's a lack of salt causes a lack of stomach acid, but giving yourself more salt is not a cure for reflux. Reflux is just a name for a lack of stomach acid, basically. And it's misnamed, especially when it's called acid reflux. It's a lack of acid reflux. If you think about it, stomach acid is supposed to be so strong that you need a special lining on your stomach to contain it. But it'll digest a finger to the bone, right? It'll digest meat down to the bone. So strong stomach acid is. It's one of the strongest acids in nature. If your stomach was as acid as it's supposed to be, if it splashed up into the esophagus, it would burn through the esophagus. That's how strong it's supposed to be. So if you feel acid in your throat, it's nowhere near acid enough, because you would be in immense traumatic, screaming pain if it really was acid enough. So basically, just using enough salt. And this all, by the way, years ago we had a miscommunication with Ben Fuchs, pharmacist Ben Fuchs. He told us to drink a glass of water with a teaspoon of salt in it. And we turned that teaspoon into a tablespoon. And then we doubled that and tripled that down the road through the years. And he couldn't believe it when we told him. But basically, we say top up your salt, use enough salt. And people say, yeah. But how do I know if I have enough? Like you said, you got to taste it. We skip all that. We just say fill up a glass and put 3 heaping tablespoons of salt in it. Basically, we call this a salt flush because it cuts through all the topping up process. You top up all at once, basically.
Okay, so you put the 3 tablespoons in a glass of water, and then what? You just drink that right up? I mean, the whole thing? Do you force yourself, even if it doesn't taste good? Like, what's the protocol here?
For the person with an ongoing digestion problem or ongoing chronic reflux, chronic GERD, it might be called. It might be to the point even where they're foaming at the mouth. Whatever, any of these cases, you drink until the pain is gone. For the average person, we want them to drink until it becomes too salty. The average person should only be able to take a sip or 2. It should just be off the hop, extraordinarily salty. And that's normal. That's good. So this is what tells us too. We call this a salt flush. We ask everybody to do it no matter what, because if they can only take a sip and they come back and tell us that, we know, okay, that's not a big problem for them. Good. Basically, that's what it means. It's good. If they say they can drink the whole glass, big problem. It means you're chronically deficient. And by the way, people can drink the whole glass. I've seen it. That's why we do it so thick. We now make it so thick because if you don't make it that thick, then they keep doing more with more water, basically. So if you put too much water and too much salt in, they could throw up. So we want to do more salt, less water. And I don't know if anybody listening, if they've ever done this before, but if you haven't, it's worth doing. No matter who you are, no matter how long you've been on the program, you might not know how far behind you are. And you make some really salty water and it'll tell you right away. But if you have stomach pain, if you drink that very salty water, you should feel it soothing your guts as you're drinking it. It should feel better and better and better. You'll be burping it all up and stuff. You keep drinking it until the pain goes away. You don't eat too much food in the future and you shouldn't have that type of problem.
Amazing stuff. Amazing. And people can learn more about this in your book too. So, because you do go into that topic thoroughly there. That's fantastic. And, people gargles, people know the benefit of multi-purpose benefits of salt. If someone has a sore throat, they can gargle salt water and it takes away the pain there because I guess it's antibacterial.
Well, if you went into the hospital with heat stroke or you have seizures, all kinds of things, they'll hook you up to an IV with saline, salty water solution, and put salt into your veins. It's it's the biggest electrolyte, basically. These are all water soluble nutrients, electrical nutrients. We call them all electrolytes, basically. That's the most important one. And just like we said with gluten, you can buy the products, you probably still need the quick gluten to get rid of the problem. It's the same with salt. If we don't put all this emphasis into salt, their problem won't be fixed. Our supplements don't come with salt. You need to do this on its own separately. The cow needs to lick the salt block and eat the forage and eat the cow pellets. It's all 3.
Okay, well said. That's a great example there. Thank you. What about olive oil? Someone is talking about is that Angie's bringing it up because that's a common question. Someone else has already asked that. Is olive oil okay? This whole Mediterranean diet has been pushed a lot. So what I know what you're going to say, but I like you to say it.
Yeah. So we say that you can have olive oil if you press it yourself on your counter and you consume it quickly. That means within 48 hours, basically, and you don't apply heat to it. There's oil. This is my very quick version of it. There's oil in every tissue in nature, every shell, every skin or peel protects the oil in all these tissues from oxidizing, getting in contact with oxygen, changing. Basically, when oil oxidizes, it turns rancid. That's the word in the biochemistry textbook. Oxidized oil is rancid oil, rotten oil, basically. When oil rots, it produces what we call free radicals. These are oxygen molecules with a less or a minus electron or whatever. They're unstable oxygen molecule. Oxygen is highly reactive. So this is why burned food is on our list. This is why deep fried food is on our list. This is why oils and liquid oils are on our list, basically, because the liquid oil is no longer protected from the skin or the shell or the peel. It has now been liberated to oxygen. As soon as it's exposed to oxygen, it's going to start to oxidize, basically. Even strong oils like coconut oil, these are processed in hot countries. So people think, well, it's solid at room temperature here, but it probably sat for months or maybe even years in a tin roof warehouse in one of these hot countries that it's produced in. All of that time it was exchanging with the air. even if you don't add heat to it. This is assuming it's pure oil, by the way. If you know anything about the olive oil industry, I would never consume olive oil on this side, on this continent. In North America, I would never consume olive oil because most of it is contaminated, because in these countries that produce it, I don't know, maybe they don't like us, they contaminate it on purpose, I don't know. But so it's not good in general. You can consume it if it's fresh. People don't really do it out there in the wild. This is why the Mediterranean diet was kind of a scam. Olives is one that people have pressed historically, yes, to consume it cold mostly. It's not traditionally used for cooking, should not use it for cooking. And that's it, basically. Oh, I forgot. The reason we take antioxidants, the reason we call them antioxidants, is because those molecules neutralize free radicals. And free radicals, this is actually, there is not a huge list of compounds that you need to know about and be worried about and stuff. Free radicals is a natural process. Oxygen is one of the most abundant elements. We produce free radicals when we breathe, when we eat, when we digest things, when we exercise. Anytime that energy is expended, we produce free radicals. That's natural. It will naturally cause damage to our cells. This is what we call aging, but it should happen slowly and gradually. When we consume oil, when we cook with oil and oxidize it further, 1 tablespoon of oil, by the way, is equivalent to multiple cartons of cigarettes when we're talking about free radicals, right? Because this is an example I used to love using. If you capture all the smoke from a cigarette up in a fume hood and you crush it down, it doesn't weigh almost anything. You can do that for an entire carton. It still doesn't weigh almost anything. You take 1 tablespoon of oil, it's going to be 100% free radicals. Your body physically can't deal with that. If you have all the 90 essential nutrients in your body still physically can't deal with all that damage. It can't deploy enough selenium to deal with a tablespoon of oil at once, or to deal with a deep fried chicken wing all at once. Can't do it. We're not exposed to this in the natural world. We're not supposed to eat that much free radicals. And our food system is basically abundant in free radicals. Anytime you see a processed food with oil in it, you can assume that oil was used, heat was used in that process somewhere. You can assume that that food is loaded with free radicals, and it shouldn't be naturally. Naturally, as we're digesting it, we're going to, even if it's an apple, we'll produce a bit of free radicals. Our body will use antioxidants, many of which are essential nutrients, selenium and zinc and vitamin C and vitamin E. These are themselves also antioxidants. We need them for some metabolic process in the body. That's why they're essential. And they also neutralize free radicals. That's why they're antioxidants. So that if you understand that, gluten messes up your digestion, we need nutrients so we fall apart, and free radicals cause a lot of the damage in our body. Those 3 pieces of information alone pretty much gives you everything that you need to actually be healthy, especially when we're talking about things like cancer and autoimmune diseases that are definitely going to have free radical aspects involved, clogged arteries. This is an effect of free radicals. I know this question was just olive oil. Let me just go 1 step deeper here. Sure. How we know that these oxidized oils basically cause clogged arteries, Dr. Wallach found this in, I think it was Atlas sheep. I think that was the species. Atlas sheep came in with clogged arteries. And he said, how the heck are these? They're not eating bacon, they're not eating butter. These are Atlas sheep. The sheep don't eat cholesterol. So how do they have cholesterol plaques lining their arteries? What's going on here? It was oxidized grains that they were eating, basically. So these oxidized oils, when anything that oxidizes, it's going to produce free radicals. So our food system is just full of this. This is why we want to avoid all oil. And by the way, let me plug it, because I don't even know if you know about it, Jill.
Okay, great. This is a great summary, Ryan. Thank you so much. And just for folks, we'll just get any last questions, put them in the chat box, because Ryan's going to chat a bit more. We might have time for another question, and then we're going to call it a day, because I know that, people have other things on the go, but this is so fascinating. I mean, I think you start to study this information, you start to connect the dots, and you start to see like how this overlaps, and in all these messages that Ryan's sharing just keep reconfirming themselves. And of course, there's nothing better than putting it to the test yourself, cutting out the bad food, getting in the good nutrients, making sure you're not you're getting antioxidants to support that, to deal with those free radicals that even just from the air we breathe we're dealing with, and then you've got a recipe for health, reversing health issues and greatly improving your health. Go ahead, Ryan.
Let me plug this. We worked really, really hard on this year. This is Dr. Wallach's cookbook, Cooking Without the Bad Foods. It was written by my best friend, Chef Norman, who owns this house here with me. And I want to say this because people get hung up on olive oil and coconut oil and stuff. This is just how we've been taught to cook, but this is not how cooking is done. This cookbook, we pretty much just took a regular chef's textbook and just removed gluten and oil. But not all recipes called for oil. Like basic cooking doesn't call for oil. This stuff is hundreds of years old. This is like French cuisine, the basics of it. You know, we're using roux and stocks and this type of stuff. They never used oil to begin with, right? So we got all the modern stuff in here as well too. And anybody who didn't know about that, you should know about this because you don't need oil. It's not actually a big deal. And we don't spend that much time talking about oil. We spend more time talking about gluten because that's causes a direct mechanical problem. Oil and deep fried food and all this stuff, that's just the stuff that's going to add up to the type of damage that's going to possibly give you cancer or kill you early, right? So that's something that you should do on your own, sort of thing. I hope that makes sense. Like if you want to improve right now, today, next week, you want a result, quit gluten, go gluten-free, right?
Totally.
But if you go oil-free right now, you're not going to get that type of results. You're not going to feel like $1 million next week. What you're going to be doing is lessening the burden on your body. And over time, you'll probably feel better. If you have age spots, they should start to dissipate slowly over time, that type of thing.
Great. Well, and congratulations on the other book. You've written several books now, and I know you have, like you said earlier, you have another one in the works. It's very exciting. But to give people recipes that follow the good food approach and taking out the bad food, and to give people actual recipes is amazing. And that book is quite thick. So how many recipes are in there?
Lots. There's hundreds. It's 300 pages. It's a full-size book. We worked really hard on it. And a lot of it is basically, I didn't know this because even though my best friend's a chef, I never really paid attention to it. But as we've been making the book over the last year and a half or so and filming all this stuff, I realized it's all pretty simple. It's all basic rules applied all over the place, just like what we talk about with health. Because we could do a 2-hour Q&A, but very soon you'll start to notice all the answers are becoming repetitive, right? Oh no, you're in this category. Oh, there's only a few categories. That's we've covered it. And it's the same when you're talking about cooking questions. People are like, well, how do I cook this with this? And as soon as you know, hey, butter burns at this temperature, ghee burns at this temperature, duck fat burns at this temperature. That's it. That's your maximum temperature. Apply it to this food that you're trying to cook. Don't go over that temperature. Yeah, it's very, very simple rules that any of us can completely cook without gluten and oil. You can even eat out there in the real world. It's possible without eating these things.
And you start to enjoy it. You feel so much better that you can't not do it, really, because the results are tangible and you have more energy and you have more mental clarity and you're losing weight and your skin is healthier and those symptoms are decreasing. It's amazing. I want to thank my sister for pointing out that I kept putting the link for your book, Ryan, in the chat, but I didn't realize it was sending it to everyone in the waiting room, and there's no one in the waiting room. So now I put it in several times, and I'm thinking, boy, I don't know why people aren't getting my message. Now I am linked to everyone, folks. So I put the link for Ryan's book on Amazon right there, and you can also look up Chef Norman's Dr. Wallach's cookbook there too. They can also get that through Amazon too, right, Ryan?
They can get it on Amazon. Actually, I have a website called noticebooks.org, noticebooks.org, and you can find all of my books, all of my links, and links to the audiobooks, all of that's there.
So www.notusbooks.org.
Yes.
Okay, I just put it in the chat there too. So you've got a couple of sources, people. You can go right to Amazon. You can go to notusbooks.org, notusbooks.org, and get the materials there that Ryan's referring to. This is amazing. Let me just see here if there's any other questions we missed. Okay, great. Well, you know what, Ryan? This has been a very resourceful conversation. You've covered a lot of ground for us. And really, it's giving us a new perspective on health, one that's far more empowering and one that we can build on ourselves, which is really necessary because, unfortunately, the medical model isn't meant to be a cure-all for everyone. Like you said, they're here to deal with infectious disease, trauma, certain diagnostics. But when it comes to a holistic health approach, people have to take steps themselves. And what they put in their mouth every day is going to add up very quickly. And what they don't put in is also going to make a difference, right? So it's about making these these important and good choices on a consistent basis. And all those cells will be super happy and will reflect your efforts right away. Ryan, as we close up, are there any, I'd like to give the floor to you for any closing remarks.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, just picking up off of what you said, the whole medical system is designed to put out fires instead of prevent them. And there is no insurance program that is going to prevent diseases for you, right? This is actually your responsibility. And it doesn't do us a service to think that, government health insurance is going to help us in any way. It's only going to help us if we catch on fire. It's only going to help us if we fall apart. And it's up to us not to do that. These things can all be tested. You can try it and see is our favorite phrase in the business, especially when it comes to the food and stuff. You can improve your life and you can prevent diseases in yourself and in everybody you know. Basically, you don't have to fall apart, don't have to age rapidly, you don't have to go on pharmaceutical drugs that give you all these side effects, and you don't have to get your leg chopped off from gangrene. And I hope I'm not sounding too dramatic, but this is the stuff that we really actually deal with out there in the world. It really is a serious situation, and it sounds too simple. I know it does. It always does. Most of the people who will be listening to this are already believers, but we can all be guilty of making it sound too simple, even though it is so simple, which is kind of the catch-22. We're all led to believe that we need to learn Latin to understand health problems, and you need to get a medical degree, and you need to know what all these drugs do on the chemical level to be able to say anything about health. And it's just not true. You don't need a high school degree even. You don't need, I know some very simple people who understand, avoid the bad foods, take the essential nutrients. Life is easy. Right? It doesn't have to be as complicated as they make it out to be, but it does require our commitment to doing it ourselves. No one's going to do it for us. Doctor's not going to do it. Insurance isn't going to do it. Free healthcare isn't going to do it. Drugs, surgery, tests, none of that is going to be the key to long health, good health and longevity. Wow,
Ryan, well said. Excellent summary. You can see why we're quoting you now. You've got memes with your wisdom on, and they have got each comment you make packs a lot of punch. So just like your book, I highly recommend people going to get it. The link is in the chat box there, folks, or you can go to notusbooks.org. That is in the chat box as well. Reach out to us directly. We'll be happy to send you these links and put you in touch with Ryan as well. This has been a very informative session, Ryan, and we'll look forward to having another interview with you too soon on about your next book. Okay.
Absolutely.
Can we unmute to thank Ryan?
Yes. No. Yeah. I'm gonna what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn off the recording, and then we'll have a chance for people to say bye together. So just one sec here.